Tennessee, 2003. The night air was thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel heavy. For the Carter family, it was the night that changed everything. Emily Carter, 17, and her younger brother Jason, 15, had left the family home in Franklin to run an errand for their mother, a quick trip to the corner market that should have taken only minutes. They never returned. Their mother, Diane Carter, waited by the front door, calling their names into the darkness, hoping they were simply delayed. Hours passed, and by midnight the realization sank in. They were gone. The local police launched a search immediately, canvassing the neighborhood, interviewing friends, and checking with local businesses. Volunteers joined the search, combing nearby fields, wooded areas, and abandoned buildings. But days turned into weeks with no sign of the children. The Carters' lives became a whirlwind of grief and unrelenting worry. Diane spent sleepless nights calling every hospital, morgue, and shelter she could think of. Her husband, Robert Carter, took to driving the same routes Emily and Jason were likely to take, looking for any clue, any trace, any glimmer of hope. Neighbors recalled seeing Robert nearly every morning before dawn, flashlight in hand, walking the streets and calling for the children. Diane spent afternoons in prayer, clutching a worn photograph of her children, refusing to accept that they were gone. "I couldn't let go," Diane said years later. "Every instinct told me they were out there, and I had to find them." Their extended family flew in from Nashville and Memphis, adding more hands to the search, more voices to the desperate calls to law enforcement and media outlets. Flyers plastered on telephone poles, grocery stores, and gas stations showed smiling faces, urging anyone with information to come forward. By the end of 2003, the case had gone cold. Police had few leads, no physical evidence, and witnesses' memories had faded. The Carters, however, refused to surrender hope. Diane started a dedicated journal of every tip, every sighting, and every phone call she received. Robert installed a dedicated answering machine for anonymous tips, which he monitored around the clock. Friends and family marveled at the couple's relentless pursuit, but also worried about the toll it was taking on their health. Sleep-deprived and anxious, Robert developed high blood pressure, and Diane experienced constant migraines and stress-induced fatigue, yet neither slowed down. They were fueled by the certainty that their children were out there somewhere, waiting to be found. Years passed and Franklin changed. New businesses opened, old fields became housing developments, and roads were widened, but Emily and Jason's disappearance remained a shadow over the town. Police occasionally revisited the case, checking old leads with fresh eyes, but it wasn't until 2015 that modern forensic technology would offer new hope. A tip came from an anonymous caller, claiming to have seen a vehicle matching the description of one associated with the children's disappearance, parked near an abandoned barn on the outskirts of town. Investigators began re-examining every piece of physical evidence from 2003, including tire tracks, partial footprints, and items found along their last known route. By 2017, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, had opened a cold case unit equipped with advanced DNA analysis, forensic genealogy tools, and digital mapping software. When the Carter case was reviewed, forensic teams discovered that a small fiber found on Emily's backpack, a piece that had been stored but largely ignored in 2003, matched a rare type of clothing, manufactured only in limited quantities, one that could be traced to a store in a nearby county. That discovery, combined with digital records and public tips, began to focus suspicion on a man named William Harlan. Harlan had lived in Franklin in 2003, and neighbors recalled seeing him driving an older pickup truck around the time the children disappeared. He had a criminal history involving abduction and assault, though he had never been convicted of a serious crime. Over the next several years, investigators pieced together Harlan's movements. Using phone records, employment history, and property records, they created a detailed timeline, placing him near the area where Emily and Jason were last seen. In 2019, forensic genealogists connected DNA recovered from a piece of clothing to Harlan's extended family tree. This breakthrough allowed investigators to obtain a warrant for his DNA, confirming a match to the fibers and materials collected in 2003. By 2020, investigators had assembled enough evidence to locate Harlan, who had been living under an assumed name in a rural cabin in southern Tennessee. He had managed to evade capture for nearly 17 years, moving frequently and cutting ties with anyone who might know his past. The TBI, in coordination with local law enforcement and federal agents, planned a careful approach to apprehend him without endangering anyone. The arrest came in March 2021. Harlan was taken into custody quietly, without incident, in the early morning hours at his remote cabin. When the Carter family received the news, emotions overwhelmed them. After nearly 18 years, the person responsible for their children's disappearance had been identified. Tears, relief, and disbelief mingled as they processed the news. They knew justice would take time, but the nightmare of uncertainty was finally over. Court proceedings began in 2022. The prosecution built a compelling case, relying on DNA evidence, witness testimony, and forensic reconstructions of the events in 2003. Harlan's defense was limited, primarily arguing the passage of time had compromised memories and evidence. Despite these claims, the overwhelming scientific and circumstantial evidence led to a conviction. By late 2023, Harlan was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. For the Carters, the verdict provided a form of closure, though the pain of losing Emily and Jason would remain forever. Diane continued to advocate for families of missing children, sharing her story publicly to encourage vigilance and support for cold cases. Robert dedicated his time to the local cold case unit, volunteering with investigators to provide insights from his own decades-long search. Community programs sprang up in Franklin, educating citizens about child safety, the importance of reporting suspicious behavior, and the power of persistence in solving cases long thought lost. As of 2025, the Carter family's advocacy and the Harlan case have become a model for cold case investigations across Tennessee. The combined efforts of law enforcement, forensic scientists, and dedicated families demonstrated that even after nearly 2 decades, justice could be achieved. Emily and Jason may never return, but their story stands as a testament to human resilience, the advances of modern science, and the unwavering commitment of a family that refused to give up. After Harlan's arrest in 2021, Franklin became a town divided between relief and disbelief. For nearly 2 decades, neighbors, friends, and even distant relatives had lived with the unsettling knowledge that the children had vanished without explanation. Many remembered the frantic search parties, the flyers plastered across the county, and the vigil held every month at the small town square. The arrest sparked conversations in every corner of Franklin, from churches to diners, as people tried to reconcile the ordinary appearance of Harlan with the horrors he had committed. For Diane Carter, the days following the arrest were surreal. She found herself walking through the front door of her home, expecting to see Emily and Jason, before reality slammed back. Photographs of her children, now yellowed at the edges, lined every surface. She touched each one reverently, whispering their names, willing herself to feel joy alongside grief. Robert, who had aged visibly in the years of searching, began attending court sessions, sitting quietly in the back row, his hands trembling as each piece of evidence was presented. They both understood that while the arrest was monumental, it was only the beginning of a process that would attempt to restore a sense of justice after 18 long years. The prosecution's case was meticulous. Forensic specialists explained how DNA extracted from fibers on Emily's backpack, combined with trace evidence found in Harlan's cabin, created an irrefutable link to the children. Investigators presented cell phone data from 2003, pieced together through painstaking digital reconstruction, showing Harlan's movements near the market and the route the children had taken. Witnesses were called, many of whom remembered Harlan from 2003 but had never seen him as a threat. One former cashier recalled Emily carrying groceries, with Harlan in the aisle, asking questions that had seemed harmless at the time, but now struck a chilling note. Community members who had assisted in the search in 2003 were invited to testify about their efforts. Local firefighters, volunteers, and neighbors described combing fields, abandoned barns, and wooded areas with flashlights and dogs, only to find emptiness. Their accounts highlighted the relentless dedication of ordinary citizens, emphasizing the contrast between community vigilance and the ease with which a predator could hide in plain sight. Each testimony was punctuated by long silences, the weight of 18 years pressing on everyone in the courtroom. Harlan's defense was largely procedural. He did not deny being present in Franklin in 2003, but his attorneys argued that memories had faded, physical evidence had degraded, and the passage of time prevented a fair trial. They suggested that coincidences in the evidence. The judge allowed the defense to present expert witnesses on the degradation of DNA over time, but the prosecution countered with detailed analysis of preservation methods and modern testing protocols, emphasizing the reliability of the DNA matches and fiber evidence. During the trial, Diane and Robert Carter remained composed outwardly, but those who saw them in the hallways described the emotional toll. Diane's hands were often clasped together, knuckles white, as if holding her composure physically. Robert would pace quietly outside the courtroom before each session, sometimes muttering to himself about missed leads and the years spent searching. Yet, despite the strain, both understood the importance of enduring the trial. Every day of testimony, every piece of evidence presented, was a step toward giving their children the recognition they had been denied for so long. The emotional climax of the trial came when the prosecution introduced video reconstructions of the events surrounding the children's disappearance. Using 3D modeling, forensic specialists recreated the route from the Carter home to the corner market, the potential paths Harlan could have taken, and the timeline of the abduction. The courtroom was silent as jurors, family members, and even Harlan himself watched the meticulous reconstruction. Each frame, each movement, brought to life the moments that had haunted Franklin for nearly 2 decades. Diane's chest heaved as she whispered, "That could have been them," while Robert's eyes glistened with both anger and sorrow. By mid-2022, the jury had heard all evidence. Deliberations were tense but swift. Within 6 hours, the verdict was delivered, guilty on all counts of kidnapping and murder. The sentence, 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, ensuring Harlan would never walk freely again. The courtroom erupted with emotion. Diane collapsed into the arms of a friend, crying freely for the first time in 18 years. Robert, though stoic, allowed himself a small nod of relief, the weight of decades lifting just slightly from his shoulders. Outside the courthouse, members of the Franklin community gathered spontaneously. Some brought candles, photographs, and notes, creating an impromptu memorial for Emily and Jason. Local news crews recorded the scene, broadcasting the triumph of perseverance and modern forensic science across Tennessee. Citizens spoke of the importance of community vigilance, the need for better resources for law enforcement, and the unwavering hope of families who refuse to give up. For the Carters, the months following the verdict were both a relief and a reckoning. Diane began working with advocacy groups for missing children, sharing her story in schools, churches, and community centers, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and the power of persistence. Robert volunteered as a consultant for cold case investigations, helping law enforcement understand the mindset of families who have searched tirelessly for loved ones. Their story became a beacon of hope and a case study in resilience, illustrating how scientific advances combined with community action could finally deliver justice, even after nearly 2 decades. In Franklin, the case prompted lasting change. Local law enforcement established a dedicated cold case unit, training officers in forensic genealogy, DNA preservation, and digital evidence recovery. Schools included modules on safety, reporting suspicious behavior, and understanding the emotional impact of unsolved crimes. Neighborhood watch programs were strengthened, emphasizing communication and community involvement. Even 18 years later, the legacy of Emily and Jason Carter shaped the town's approach to safety and justice. By 2025, the Carter family's efforts and the resolution of the case had gained statewide attention. Law enforcement agencies across Tennessee cited the case as an example of perseverance, modern technology, and the critical importance of preserving evidence. Diane and Robert, though older and bearing the marks of nearly 2 decades of grief, remained active advocates. Their message was clear. No matter how much time passes, no family should lose hope and no case should be forgotten. The story of Emily and Jason Carter serves as a powerful reminder that the pursuit of justice is a marathon, not a sprint. Through the dedication of family, the evolution of science, and the vigilance of a community, even the coldest of cases can be solved. While the Carters' children could never be returned to them, the resolution of their case brought clarity, accountability, and a form of closure that had been denied for 18 long years. The aftermath of Harlan's conviction rippled through the Carter family and the entire Franklin community. While justice had been served, the years of fear, uncertainty, and grief left permanent marks. Diane Carter, who had spent nearly 2 decades navigating the abyss of her children's disappearance, now faced the challenge of rebuilding a life that had been frozen in 2001. Every corner of her home, once filled with the energy of Emily and Jason, remained a landscape of absence. She began small, placing fresh flowers on the dining table, repainting the children's rooms in bright, hopeful colors, and slowly organizing the photographs and memorabilia she had preserved so meticulously. Robert Carter, who had been a constant presence in the investigation, now turned his focus outward. He started working with the Franklin Police Department to review other unresolved cases from the early 2000s, applying lessons learned from the painstaking process of connecting evidence to Harlan. His deep knowledge of the case, combined with the insights of modern forensic science, became invaluable to detectives grappling with cold cases that had been abandoned due to time, lack of evidence, or limited technology. He often said, "If it took 18 years for my children, it shouldn't take that long for anyone else." For the local community, the resolution of the case offered both relief and a stark reminder of vulnerabilities they had long ignored. Parents became more vigilant about neighborhood safety, schools implemented stricter supervision policies, and local law enforcement adopted more proactive community engagement programs. The Franklin Police Department established a public awareness campaign, highlighting the importance of reporting suspicious behavior immediately, emphasizing that even seemingly ordinary interactions could hold significance. One particularly moving initiative was the creation of a memorial garden near the Franklin Town Square. Planted with perennial flowers, shrubs, and small trees, it became a space for reflection and remembrance for families affected by disappearances and violent crimes. Diane and Robert oversaw its construction personally, selecting plants that symbolized resilience, hope, and memory. Every year on the anniversary of Emily and Jason's disappearance, community members, local officials, and volunteers gathered there to light candles, place flowers, and share stories of remembrance. Meanwhile, Diane took on an active role in advocacy work, partnering with organizations specializing in missing children and cold case resolution. She traveled to conferences across Ohio and neighboring states, sharing her experience to teach law enforcement officials, educators, and families how to navigate the emotional and procedural complexities of long-term investigations. Her presentations were often emotional, punctuated by photographs of Emily and Jason and the personal anecdotes that made their story human, relatable, and urgent. Robert, despite his advancing age and the lingering stress on his health, also found purpose in advocacy. He worked closely with forensic scientists, helping to refine techniques for extracting DNA from older evidence and reconstructing crime timelines with limited data. His guidance proved instrumental in solving other long-dormant cases in the region, and he was widely recognized as a pioneer in combining traditional investigative methods with modern technology. The Carter children, Emily and Jason, though gone, left a legacy that extended far beyond their family. Law enforcement agencies began reviewing cases that had once been considered unsolvable. In 2023, a neighboring county solved a 2002 abduction case using similar DNA and forensic genealogy techniques, citing the Ohio 2001 resolution as a key influence. Stories of perseverance, diligence, and scientific innovation spread through the state, offering hope to families who had been waiting decades for answers. The emotional toll on the Carters, however, remained profound. Diane described nights when the absence of her children felt unbearably heavy, and she sometimes questioned whether her advocacy work could ever bring genuine comfort. Robert, too, experienced moments of despair, replaying the missed opportunities and the years lost to waiting. Yet together they found solace in each other, in their community, and in the knowledge that their children's story had led to meaningful change. Community outreach programs flourished, inspired by the Carters' example. Volunteers received training in identifying and preserving potential evidence, while schools introduced age-appropriate safety lessons, emphasizing personal awareness and the importance of speaking up. Franklin became a model town for cold case awareness, where vigilance, education, and community engagement intersected to prevent tragedies from going unnoticed. By 2025, Diane and Robert had grown accustomed to living with their grief, tempered by the satisfaction that Harlan had been held accountable. They continued to visit the Memorial Garden, attend conferences, and work with law enforcement, ensuring that the lessons learned from their personal tragedy were shared widely. Their commitment inspired others in Franklin to advocate for victims' families, contributing to a broader cultural shift toward proactive, engaged, and technologically informed policing. Despite the years of hardship, the Carters' perseverance had changed the narrative. Emily and Jason were no longer just names on a missing persons poster. Their lives, brief as they had been, became catalysts for justice, community awareness, and systemic improvements in cold case investigations. Diane and Robert often reflected on how technology, dedication, and the collective effort of a community had converged to reveal the truth. They emphasized that no case should be considered too old to solve, and no family too broken to seek answers. As Franklin continued to heal, the story of Emily and Jason Carter became woven into the town's collective memory, a powerful reminder of the resilience of families, the critical importance of vigilance, and the enduring impact of justice delayed but ultimately delivered. The Carters' journey demonstrated that time alone could not erase the truth, and that even the longest shadows could be illuminated by determination, science, and community support. By 2022, nearly 2 decades had passed since the breakthrough that identified Harlan as the perpetrator. Franklin, once a town overshadowed by fear and unanswered questions, had slowly begun to reclaim its sense of normalcy. Streets that had once been quiet out of caution now buzzed with everyday life, and neighborhoods that had felt uneasy in the aftermath of the 2001 disappearances were becoming vibrant again. Yet beneath the surface, the echoes of Emily and Jason's absence remained. Their story had left an indelible mark on families, schools, and law enforcement alike. Diane Carter, now in her early 60s, continued her advocacy with renewed focus. She spearheaded the Franklin Families United Initiative, a non-profit dedicated to supporting relatives of missing persons and training communities in proactive safety measures. Workshops were held monthly at the community center, with local police officers, forensic specialists, and psychologists speaking to attendees about recognizing early warning signs and preserving evidence in potential crimes. Diane's voice, once quiet with grief, had grown steady, resolute, and commanding. Robert, who had suffered several heart episodes over the years, found his own rhythm in mentoring young detectives and interns. His experience with the Carter case made him a living repository of lessons learned, bridging traditional investigative methods with the modern technology that had eventually solved the case. Every summer, he hosted forensic workshops for high school students interested in criminal justice, encouraging curiosity, ethical responsibility, and meticulous attention to detail. His mantra, repeated in every session, was simple: patience, persistence, and observation. Never underestimate the little things. The Franklin Police Department, inspired by the case, established a permanent cold case unit in 2023. The unit combined data analysts, forensic genealogists, and veteran detectives to review unresolved cases across the county. Their work was methodical, often painstaking, but the momentum from the Carter case energized the team. Within a year, they had reopened 3 cases from the early 2000s, 2 of which were on the path to resolution through DNA and fingerprint reanalysis. Detectives credited the visibility and public awareness generated by Diane and Robert's advocacy for the influx of tips and witness statements that had previously been withheld or overlooked. Schools in Franklin also incorporated lessons inspired by Emily and Jason's story. Age-appropriate modules on personal safety, digital awareness, and community responsibility became standard in middle and high schools. Teachers noticed a subtle but significant change in students' engagement. Children were asking more questions, being more observant, and reporting concerning behavior without fear. Parents, once hesitant to confront their own fears about the past, began participating in community watch programs and volunteering for neighborhood safety committees. Diane found moments of personal solace in small, symbolic acts. Each morning she visited the memorial garden she and Robert had helped establish, placing fresh flowers and occasionally adding handwritten notes about progress in ongoing investigations. On October 12th, the anniversary of the children's disappearance, she and Robert held a quiet vigil at home, lighting candles in memory of Emily and Jason. This ritual, once heavy with sorrow, had gradually become a moment of reflection and gratitude for the justice they had finally seen served. In 2024, the Carter family's advocacy caught national attention when a documentary focused on long-term cold case resolutions featured Franklin as a model town. Interviews with Diane and Robert highlighted their personal journey, the evolution of investigative technology, and the importance of community involvement. The documentary sparked renewed interest in cold cases nationwide, with families reaching out for guidance and law enforcement agencies seeking to replicate Franklin's approach. The local community, too, had transformed. Annual awareness events, previously small gatherings of a few concerned neighbors, had grown into citywide initiatives. Franklin hosted forensic fairs, safety workshops, and memorial walks that drew participants from surrounding counties. Each event carried the message that vigilance, education, and persistence could prevent tragedy.